Happy Monday, folks. Welcome to Power 30. We got Pete Quinn, Colliers International, head of industrial real estate. We got mega projects happening all over the Midwest. We got a vaccine update. Don't listen to the mainstream media, folks. They're closer to a vaccine than you think. We got Brandi reading the news. Hang on to your seatbelts. Power 30 starts now.
Hey there, here's a look at some of the week's biggest CRE headlines. Apartment REITs are headed for troubled waters, according to research firm Fitch Ratings. The research specifically points to U.S. multifamily apartment REITs with high exposure to Class B and C properties in gateway cities for being vulnerable to the economic fallout of the coronavirus pandemic. This is due in part to the risk of urban flight and high job losses among lower income households. Class B and C apartments have been held up by government stimulus and expanded unemployment benefits, according to many of our Power 30 guests and consultants. Tenant retention for properties in Fitch-rated REITs was in the 50 to 60% range. Rent collections at 96 to 99% during the second quarter of 2020. Occupancy was mostly above 95%, with renewals still positive. Rents have held up in the suburbs and coastal markets. They haven't seen a shift to buying from renting due to still high home prices. But yet, we have had several reports that eviction moratoriums are allowing renters to go several months without paying rent, which will inevitably start to show up and drop net operating income across the sector. I talked to a couple CBRE experts to find out what's driving distribution, and there were a couple different trends they pointed out. Todd's going to dig into this more in just a couple of minutes, but Jack Fraker and Jonathan Bryan told me a huge part is just the standard consumer demand, which reached new levels during the pandemic. Customers have a real expectation that their orders will be delivered within a day or two, if not sooner. And there's also a race to get distribution facilities up around fast-growing communities, not just because there are going to be more customers, but because as those homes go up, developers need somewhere to keep everything required for construction. We're talking everything and the kitchen sink, probably especially that. Another impact of the pandemic, manufacturers really didn't like the disruptions to the international supply chain, so they're bringing production back to the U.S. and if not here, Mexico. Either way, those companies have to find somewhere in the U.S. to keep those products before they get shipped out to their destination. Our own Dan Rafter is reporting that Browning Development and Purdue Research Foundation have big plans for the Discovery Park District in West Lafayette, Indiana. That's about halfway between Indianapolis and Chicago. Rafter reports the real estate firm is in the early stages of a multi-decade project to bring research labs, student housing, hotels, traditional multifamily space, office space, and even single-family homes to 450 acres on the southwest edge of Purdue University's campus. Representatives from Browning say the district will eventually total more than 7 million total square feet, with a total investment of more than $1 billion. Browning and other developers will be tackling vertical development at this site for the next 15 to 30 years. Currently, several projects are either completed or under construction, including traditional student housing, multi-tenant private office space, and 2 advanced manufacturing facilities, plus some non-student multifamily housing. Developers in St. Louis are planning their own mega project, a youth sports destination called the Powerplex, and we at Power 30 got to give them a nod on that name choice. Pretty good. Dan Buck and Colleen O'Neill recently spoke at an RE Journals event in St. Louis about the project.
Panelists here, Dan Buck and Colleen O'Neill of Big Sports Properties, featuring Powerplex Sports and Recreation. Introduce yourself a little further and talk about the project, and tell us about some of the construction timelines that you're looking at.
You bet. Thanks, Terry. Thanks to RE Journals and all the work going into this project. It's not easy pulling off one of these things in the COVID world, I'm sure. So you've done a great job. Well, no good deed goes unpunished. This project has taken us over 4 years. And anytime you embark on a public-private partnership, you obviously are going to forecast some challenges, but there's been one constant during the 4 years of this development, and that is the unbelievable growth of the industry itself. Youth sports tourism continues to boom. Even in a post-COVID world, it's clearly has shown its ability to be resilient. The numbers around youth sports on the very first slide are just, these don't lie. When you see companies like Disney and Dolly World and Cedar Point and Six Flags and Comcast and Dick's and big investors like BlackRock and Bain Capital coming to the table with hundreds of millions of dollars to build new facilities and field houses and ballparks and dance venues and complexes all over the country, you know that it is an industry with a great future. The industry is quickly changing too. In the last 6 to 8 years, we've seen it move from a municipality and city, county-driven type government project to more and more public-private partnerships and more business leaders stepping into this ever-growing industry. Right now, there's more than 20 major sports across the United States that offer regional and national tournaments. There's more than 30 million children who play within those 20 different groups. The industry itself continues to grow, more and more sports coming online. Pickleball, believe it or not, is becoming a huge travel industry where seniors are now getting into it, adults are getting into it, and they are going to regional and national tournaments and spending money. We're seeing this sports tourism traffic now starting to cross across all demographics. It used to be kind of the kids leading the way. Now we're seeing the millennials. Now we're seeing middle-aged people. We're seeing seniors. I play men's baseball. I go on 2 national tournaments a year to Florida and Arizona. The fact this industry continues to grow, and to put it into context, you see that number on that the second slide, if you advance it 1, there's a number that shows it's a $20 billion industry. To put that into context, the National Football League is a $14 billion industry. And I would argue that the $20 billion spent by youth sports consumers is a much more diverse spread across most of the audience. It's not in huge TV contracts. It's not in huge sponsorships that are held by the clubs. This is money that is directly spent within the communities of which these families play. We're talking hotels, restaurants, retailers, gas. Think of all the ways in which this consumer spends money, and it's not a one and done. The National Football League is a 16-week schedule. This baseball, softball, volleyball, basketball, lacrosse, it is a 52-week-a-year industry that is constantly driving traffic each and every day to the consumer products and services and consumers. So this next slide is the Powerplex uniquely being a national leader. It's the vast amount of amenities and resources we'll be able to offer. Everything you see on the right of your screen on that slide is the things we'll be creating with our $60 million redevelopment of the existing Mills Mall in Hazelwood. But everything you see on the left are things that already exist, and all we have to do is go find great partners and quality tenants and operators for the 15 cafes, the restaurants, the bars, the go-karts, the miniature golf. We already have a great partner on the theater redevelopment. We're going to hand deliver more than 5,000 athletes each and every weekend to the consumers in this building. That's just athletes. The national average, according to the Sports Commission, is 3.2 visitors per athlete. So if you do the math, that's somewhere between 12 and 15,000 people on this campus each and every weekend. That is a great driver. Then you say, well, Dan, what do you do Sunday through Thursday? We already have commitments of over 500 athletes nightly who will practice in this venue. Parents are dropping them off, and that's baseball, softball, volleyball, basketball players who are there Sunday through Thursday doing their practices. So the campus buzzes literally 7 days a week.
It's important to note they're not starting from scratch here. A number of users already exist, including a Cabela's. This is going to be an exciting project to watch. According to Heartland Real Estate Business, the Detroit City Council approved the sale of the former Michigan State Fairgrounds where Amazon is set to open a 3.8 million square foot facility. Detroit-based Sterling Group and Dallas-based Hillwood Investment Properties have reportedly agreed to pay $9 million for that land. The Amazon mega facility is set to occupy half the 142-acre site, which is located at the corner of Woodward Avenue and 8 Mile Road. Amazon projects it's going to bring about 1,200 new full-time jobs to the area. The remaining acreage will be dedicated to auto part suppliers or other employers, according to the developers. A little later in the show, we talked to industrial expert Pete Quinn about just how big Amazon's impact on industrial real estate is right now. The National Multifamily Housing Council recently reported on the two major presidential candidates' views on multifamily housing. The Trump administration has focused largely on regulatory reform, but hasn't put out a statement of its position. When it comes to housing, this administration has sought to identify ways to remove barriers to developing housing, and among his top accomplishments, the president spearheaded the creation of the Opportunity Zones program, which was enacted as part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. This has already led to housing starts in low-income communities all across the nation. The current administration has also pushed to reduce barriers to developing and preserving affordable housing and replace several Obama-era housing discrimination rules. Former Vice President Joe Biden released a comprehensive housing plan that commits to investing $640 billion over 10 years. His housing proposal can be found on his campaign website. Biden's proposal lacks specific details, but lists lofty goals such as pursuing a comprehensive approach to ending homelessness and ending redlining and other discriminatory and unfair practices in the housing market. It's time for a COVID update, and there is good news to share on the vaccine front. Moderna's phase 3 trial is fully enrolled, and the company anticipates it may have sufficient data to seek a regulatory approval as early as November, with some sources saying it could be ready for market in December. Regulators say a certain amount of time has to have passed since participants received their second dose. For Moderna, that would happen in mid-November. Moderna is one of 4 phase 3 trials currently going on in the U.S., and each of these has tens of thousands of participants. A competitive vaccine developed by Pfizer is expected to have early data showing whether the vaccine works by the end of October. Then it's going to take a couple more weeks to evaluate longer-term safety. Both AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson announced they're restarting their trials in the U.S. that had been put on hold due to potential safety concerns. They are now cleared to resume. A pause in trials is pretty normal practice to investigate illnesses among participants, which typically turn out to be unrelated. For all of these vaccines, once completed, early doses are going to go to people who are high risk, including healthcare workers and people who live and work in long-term care facilities. In a salute to this upcoming accomplishment, Monsef Salawi, co-leader of the U.S. government's Operation Warp Speed effort, is so confident that Moderna and Pfizer's vaccines will succeed in phase 3 trials that he thinks every American could be immunized by June, according to a report by Fierce Pharma. Finally, the FDA has approved Gilead's remdesivir as a treatment for COVID-19, opening it up to many more patients across the United States. According to National Real Estate Investor, commercial real estate investors are showing increasing interest in biolab facilities as healthcare research and development has accelerated due to the pandemic. Russell Brenner, president of the Medical Office and Life Sciences Division with CA Ventures, states that very few sectors can demonstrate the same level of rent growth, especially in the COVID-19 environment. Similar to medical office, he says life sciences is viewed as a defensive asset class. Among the biggest examples of the sector's current popularity, private equity giant Blackstone made the decision to sell the Biomed Realty Trust from one short-term fund to another fund that has the ability to hold it indefinitely, according to the Wall Street Journal.
Folks, mea culpa. There's supposed to be a segment in here that has lots of clips from our events in Detroit and our event in Kansas City, and I found out it just takes a lot of time to clip up video. Next week, I'll have those in here, plus we're doing Central Texas and South Texas this week, so some great clips coming your way. Hang out for Power 30 next week for those. Moving on back to Brandi.
NAIOP released a report last week proclaiming a coming evolution in warehouses. Industrial real estate will continue to be reconfigured as a new wave of innovation responds to growing consumer demand for fast product delivery, rising land and labor costs, and the increasing complexity of logistics systems. Advancements in technology and the adoption of new applications for data analytics, robotics, and autonomous vehicles are already improving productivity and allowing for more efficient use of space. Supply chains and the buildings on which they rely are becoming increasingly interwoven with the everyday life of cities. Technological innovation is contributing to and accelerating each of these trends. For more on the future of industrial real estate, let's go over to Todd for an interview with Colliers National Director of Industrial Services, Pete Quinn.
Well, let's start with then. My first one is the Amazon effect. It seems like every time industrial comes up, Amazon, somebody called them Big Smiley last week. Okay. But they've got activity in their market. And then and then we're on a webinar for St. Louis. They have activity in St. Louis. I'm on a webinar for Michigan. They have activity in Michigan. How big and how broad is their impact on industrial right now?
I'll answer that two ways. Number one, they're huge. They're the biggest user of industrial space out there, and they're expanding dramatically. E-commerce has been growing significantly over the last 5 years, about 10% a year. As soon as COVID hit and people that swore they'd never buy things online, everybody started buying online, and it's grown 50% this year. So it's been coming, but it's dramatic right now. So they're having an impact two ways. Number one, just they use a lot of space themselves. I think we track, there's 44 transactions going on around the country right now with Amazon. And you're right, they're all over the place. A lot of our brokers are working with them on projects. A lot of our clients are doing buildings for them. But the other impact they've had is they've made a science out of getting product from the manufacturers to the consumer very, very quickly and very inexpensively. That's forced their competition to raise their game. So more and more companies are copying them and going with e-commerce. And so it's just added fuel to the fire. So right now, because of Amazon predominantly starting this, everybody's rethinking their supply chain strategy, and our activity level is off the charts, unprecedented activity right now.
So do people come in and say, I want an Amazon-like delivery system, and how do I start? I got to think they're on that agenda
I
somewhere.
think that's fair. Yeah, absolutely, Todd. It's getting the product faster and cheaper is the name of the game right now. And how do you do that? So we got a guy that works with us at Colliers. He runs our logistics and transportation consulting group. His name is Greg Healy. He's basically a genius. He's lived in like 8 countries. He speaks 6 languages fluently, and he's a supply chain guru. And he's been predicting a lot of what's going on for 3 years. And it's changed the whole dynamic of industrial real estate. It used to be, you knew Southern California, the I-81 corridor in the Northeast. There were certain pockets, Chicago, they were always going to have significant distribution presence because that's where the people were. So you always had the big DCs. Now you can be anywhere because of the way that everybody's changing their supply chain. So you're starting to see markets that never were big distribution markets land million square foot distribution centers. So it's really changed the way that people do business. And that's, if you're in industrial real estate, I've been in industrial real estate for 30 plus years, and that was never the cool thing to be. It's cool to be in office, it's cool to be in retail. It's cool to be in industrial right now. I've got brokers that are in office and brokers that are in retail that want to talk to me about switching to industrial. So it's kind of cool to be the cool guy in class now.
How does that affect the new building, old building? Is Amazon only taking new product, or are they reaching into and grabbing other things for last mile delivery sites? Does it cross the board?
Both. It is having an impact for a lot of reasons, and not just Amazon. We have growth besides Amazon. A lot of retailers that were not in e-commerce are in e-commerce now. We did a 1 million square foot plus distribution center recently for Kohl's, as an example, department store. So more and more people are using it. It is changing the way that buildings are built. The ceiling height, for an example, we're going higher and higher and higher. And
So where are you at now with ceiling height?
Kind of standard anymore is 36 foot clear,
Okay.
but it's going to go higher because one of the things that's changing is because of labor issues. Labor's a huge issue, and I know that's something you and I wanted to talk about, but labor's tough to come by. And so we were already in industrial, we were already moving to more robotics, and we were already looking at our supply chain, our material handling equipment, trying to upgrade it, trying to lessen the need for humans touching product. It's more efficient. That's been sped up as well. And so you're seeing the material handling equipment, the robotics getting more and more sophisticated. That's going to allow you to continue to go higher. It's also going to require you to have super flat floors in some instances for robotics, because you want to retain labor. You didn't worry about the employees before, but now more and more companies in the southern states predominantly are asking for air-conditioned warehouses, not for the product, but to make the workers more comfortable so they don't lose their workers. It's driving up wages. You know, it's really been a very positive thing. You're seeing really very nice break areas for the employees. When they're on breaks, they'll have games, they'll have nice places to eat. That wasn't industrial 5 years ago, but now it's because of labor, you're competing for labor. You're seeing industrial buildings get nicer and nicer. It's really kind of fun. It's kind of fun right now to see the innovative ways. You'll see basketball courts and distribution centers, things like that. So it's really a new game today, but it's fun. It's a good thing, I think.
I also hear a lot about onshoring and nearshoring, and I'm going to just guess 50% say it's a myth. It's never really going to happen. And then I'll talk to a person that says, yeah, we're having discussions right now, and it will have an impact, maybe just in the South. But what's your take on that from Colliers' perspective?
Well, first of all, it's a great question. I ask it a lot. I've been doing a lot of webinars over the last 5 months, trying to keep our clients and our broker associates informed. And I ask that question too. Is it a myth? Are you actually seeing it? And the answers are a little bit mixed, but I think we're seeing a lot more nearshoring than onshoring right now, depending on the election results. And you can decide who I'm talking about, because I'm not going to make any political statements. But if one person wins, I think the onshoring will really take off. I think people want to. This COVID's taught us a lot, and manufacturers' supply chains, when they're bringing things in from Asia, it wasn't all that reliable. And for the first time in a long, long time, we saw store shelves that were empty. That scared people. That's going to result in two things. Number one, manufacturers are rethinking just-in-time delivery. It used to be that you didn't want to have one extra roll of toilet paper that you didn't need. You tried to keep exactly how much you needed. Companies absolutely right now are increasing their safety stock. They don't ever want to be in a position where they run out of product again. I'm hearing everything from 5 to 15%. The companies are increasing their safety stock. Every time you increase safety stock 5 to 15%, that means you need at least 5 to 15% more space. So that's going to have a huge impact. The other thing is, when you put things on a boat and send them across the ocean and it takes 12 weeks, that's not necessarily good. Plus, one of the political parties is deregulating a lot of things, making it easier to manufacture here, not punishing you for manufacturing here. So if one party wins, I think you're going to see a lot more onshoring. If the other party wins, I don't think you'll see much onshoring, but you'll still see nearshoring, and you already are. Mexico's exploding. Our brokers in Mexico are busier than they've ever been because of that. They're really focused on building buildings down there because people are starting to look at Mexico. Plus, the reasons to go to China to manufacture, it was so much less expensive because of the labor issues, but their labor costs have gone up because they've had so much of an increase. And, they've run into other problems as well. The supply chain issues, obviously, but also losing some, they do a pretty good job of copying us over there and stealing some of our secrets. I think more and more companies are saying, and it was already happening 3 years ago. I don't think I can mention the company, but I was talking to a real estate director for a very large retailer, name brand not a retailer, manufacturer for clothing products. They moved out of China 4 years ago. So you already started seeing that, but now I think just like COVID made e-commerce grow exponentially, I think you're going to see the same thing with onshoring and nearshoring.
But is
It's
that
happening
Mexico?
now,
You
but
think
not a
that's
lot.
Mexico? That Mexico more than the U.S.? Or it depends
Right
on the
now,
election? Yeah.
I think it does. That's a personal opinion, but I know that the double taxation, the tax rates in general, the regulations were forcing companies, manufacturers out of the country. One side wants to deregulate more, lower taxes. That would encourage companies to come back. The other side wants to raise taxes, add more regulations. That's going to have companies flee. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to see that. So I think a lot of people are taking a wait and see attitude until after November 3rd before they make some hard decisions about their supply chain.
I'm a firm believer we're not deciding anything on November 3rd.
You know what? That would be a separate discussion. I hope you're wrong, but I understand what you're saying. You know, it's kind of crazy out there right now. It's really hard to focus sometimes because there's such a dramatic difference. I've never seen such a stark contrast in the two sides. You know, and both sides are convinced the other side's totally wrong. Yeah. And it's going to be fascinating. But I'm afraid you're probably right. I'm praying you're wrong. I hope that November 4th.
The elections are going to go to the Supreme Court. Both sides are going to say you're a bunch of cheaters.
Well, I was talking about this with one of my associates the other day, and I said, you remember during the Bush-Gore election and the hanging chads in Florida? I think it's going to be that times 100 because both sides are passionate. Both sides are convinced they're right. And both sides are convinced if the other side wins, it's the end of the world. And so we are in some uncharted territories, but I have faith in the American people. I have faith in America. I think we'll be just fine. We'll get through it.
Yeah. The pendulum always swings.
Always.
So you talked about a lot of change, and I think you touched on some of it. But what are some of the other new tenant demands? Robotics, you said flat floors. Does that mean you can go in an old building and put down floor leveler like I do in my basement? Or is that got to be new construction? What do the tenant demands look like?
Typically, it's cheaper just to build a new building. You can do it. You can, in certain parts of the country, you can raise ceiling height. You know, in Chicago, that's happened several times. There's companies that specialize in that that'll take a 24-foot clear building, go in and make it a 36-foot clear, but it's expensive. The biggest concern I have for industrial right now, there's two. One is lack of product. We were working with a large manufacturer that needed a 400,000 square foot distribution center in Toronto. They have less than 1% vacancy in Toronto. And there was very, very limited opportunities. The opportunities that existed, this particular company had to, once they agreed to terms, they said, we need 30 days to get board approval, and then we can sign the lease. They wouldn't wait 30 days because they had 5 companies lined up behind them that wanted to lease the space. So running out of product, I think, is a very, very real concern. And to add to that dilemma with government offices in many states being shut down, or at least working limited hours, it slowed down the process of building buildings, getting the permits, getting the approvals. We're running out of space in a lot of markets right now. So that's the one concern. The other concern is the labor shortage. And that is something that's going to be around right now. I just sent an article I read about 2 weeks ago. I can't quote where I read it, but they said right now we have more people working in warehouses and distribution centers than at any time in our history. And that's during a COVID shutdown that's got 7.9% unemployment, and we're employing more workers, and we're just heading into the holiday season. It's going to be interesting. Let me put it this way: anyone that wants to work over the next few months, there's jobs out there. You just have to go to a distribution center, and they'll grab you and pay you well. It's good to get in that business right now. we have a pretty sophisticated process to identify available labor, because clients need to know that before they make a decision. It used to be totally based on transportation costs. That's
Right.
still a
Do the
big
math.
consideration.
How long does it take me to drive from here to here?
Exactly.
And that was it.
And it's pretty easy. Well,
Yeah.
it's easy for people smarter than me, but they would identify where you should be based on where your consumers were, your clients were, where your product's coming from, and then they would just do the math. It was a math equation. But now they're looking at labor. Is there labor there? What are the economic incentives? You know, some states are more aggressive than other states with the economic incentives. So we talk a lot. Real estate brokers used to talk about real estate, and they still do, but it's a lot more than real estate.
Yeah. Number of dock doors. You got 46 dock
Yeah,
doors. Let's
that's
go.
changing too.
Yes.
The trucks are getting bigger, so the parking lots need to change. The turning ratios need to change. The ceiling height is changing. There's certain types of products that you'll never, I should never say never, but it's going to be a while before robotics can replace human beings. And then during the Christmas season, the holiday season, where are these workers going to come from? So the absorption in the third quarter was, we absorbed 57.2 million square feet of industrial space, which gives us a year-to-date total of absorption of 164.7 million square feet. That's a 35% increase over the second quarter. In the third quarter, second quarter was dismal for obvious reasons. That's a 3% increase year-to-date over last year, which was a record year. So we don't have issues in industrial. We're not in a recession. I turn on the national news and they keep talking about how bad the economy is. If you're in industrial real estate, if you're an owner, a developer, a broker, a manager, our management, Colliers management group, we've increased 80 million square feet this year. We're managing over 400 million square feet of industrial space. There's a lot of opportunities out there. You hear about, you talked about onshoring and nearshoring. People have such diverse opinions. Some people think it's way overrated. Some people think it's a real thing. The last mile delivery would fall in that same category. I've talked to people that are incredibly intelligent, successful people that think the last mile is greatly exaggerated. I talk to other people who think it's very real. I think what you're going to see, and we're already seeing, is how innovative Americans are. We're seeing companies reinvent themselves. Retailers are the same way. They're not going to just say, "Oh gosh, nobody's going to go to stores anymore. Let's just shut down." They're going to figure. I've been the color analyst for the Purdue Radio Network this will be my 29th year in the booth. I've never seen anything like this. The Big Ten is checking these kids every day, testing them. So kids they get the flu, they're going to get it, and it's going to be real interesting to see. We don't even have a 2 deep. 29th year of broadcasting, I don't even have a 2 deep. I don't even know who's playing.
Who's going to win the Big Ten?
Oh God, who knows?
Right?
You know, I wouldn't be shocked if Purdue won it. I wouldn't be shocked if Minnesota won it. It's kind of coming down to who can play the most starters during the games and who can motivate their team the best. I think Minnesota has an edge because I think Fleck's such a great motivator. But I think it's going to come down to which coach can get their kids to play at the same level they would play in front of thousands and thousands of fans. It's going to be hard because it's going to look a lot like a spring practice where you might have 700 people in the stands watching a practice. And so can you keep these kids motivated? But I think it's going to be interesting.
Cool. Well, it's good to talk to you. Appreciate it. Go Purdue.
Boiler up, baby.